Hey, good afternoon and good morning and good evening, wherever you might be coming from. My name's Howie Scott with Crisis Consultant Group. First and foremost, I want to let you know there's nothing wrong with your computer screen or however you might be watching this today. I'm the only one that's going to be on here with a picture. Steve is at a unannounced location in northern Wisconsin, but he was kind enough to join us on the phone. So first of all, I want to welcome you all back if you're coming back with us. And secondly, if this is your first time with us, we really are thankful to have you and hope you enjoy what we have for you today. This is going to be, I think, our 31st webinar we've done. And we wouldn't be doing these if it wasn't for you guys returning and the new folks coming. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. Just to tell you real quickly for the new folks that haven't been here before about myself, my name's Howie Scott. I was a law enforcement officer for 31 years. Started my career off working in confinement and then made my way out to the street as a patrol officer. Spent the majority of my career on our full-time SWAT team. And then the last 3 years of my career, I spent in the academy teaching incumbent and recruit officers. Took about 4 days off and decided that the Crisis Consultant Group was the next job for me, next chapter for me. Started off with and still am the lead for the active threat response and also teaching de-escalation. I'm going to turn it over to Steve, let him tell you about himself, and then we'll get right back into the topic for today.
Right on. Thanks, Howard. Super excited to be here. A little background on myself. First 17 years of my professional career, I worked in residential treatment, juvenile males, 12 to 17. When I first started, my shift was 3 in the afternoon till 8 in the morning, right? So I was that guy facilitating groups, helping navigate through tough information that clients may have received. And fortunately for you all, you don't have to see my face today, but I was the first face that the client saw every morning. And I know that doesn't, that may not be appealing for everyone. But then as I progressed through my professional career, I was assistant director at that program. I ended up starting and running a group home for 5 years. And then the last 5 years, or 4.5 years, I've been a full-time calm every storm trainer for the Crisis Consultant Group. And just like Howie, he only took 4 days off. I made that transition because I really believe in the curriculum and what it can offer. And just super happy to be here today.
Yeah, 100% correct there, Steve, as far as our curriculum, what we teach, what we believe. It's a lifestyle, a culture change. It's really giving back to folks to do things in a safer, kinder, gentler way, I think, is our approach when we are dealing with folks in crisis. Talking about today's topic, we're going to talk about personal initiative and what that means and how we can bring that to our workforce and try to make some changes through our own initiative. So that's where we're heading today. And just passing it back over to you, Steve. Personal initiative. What's that really say to you when I throw that out to you?
I think it's being the catalyst for change, and it's that self-motivation. So I think a lot of times people have ideas, but maybe it's not received really strongly right away, or they may not even know how to navigate promoting that change. So assisting in reaching those long-term goals and helping to be the change within an organization.
Right on. Yeah, I like that answer a lot. And forgive me, I wanted to open up with a couple of personal quotes that I like for myself and just wanted to pass on to you all as far as leadership. Because I think if you're out in the working, you may not be technically identified as a leader in a leadership position, but if you're at home and you have family, at some point in your life, you're going to be leading people. And just some of the quotes I came across. The essence of great leadership is influence, not authority. And I think we've seen that a lot of times where people think they're the leader just identified by the amount of stripes on their shoulder or the title that they have. But that's really not defining what leadership is. It's the influence
Right.
you have on others, right?
Yep.
And the test of leadership is how well you act during a crisis, right? I call it paper dragons, and a lot of some of the folks I knew in a former career went through the ranks, became leaders on paper, and were never tested, right? Never tested it during the crisis phase, but they carried that persona about them that they were the leaders, and you had to listen to them because they took a test and became highly qualified and were promoted into a leadership type position, but never tested. I always say no one knows how they're going to act until bullets start coming their way. And then my third quote here is, change will not come if we wait for it. Some other person, some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we've been waiting for. I wonder if anybody in the chat knows who that quote's from. If you do, go ahead and throw it in there. And in a few seconds, I'll tell you who it was. But I think it's pretty influential, because I always, to follow up with that, I say, if not us, then who? Do we just pass on when we retire from our career and things remain the same? We used to have a saying on our team, just because it's tradition doesn't mean it's a good tradition. And I think that happens in a lot of establishments. This is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we're going to do it. So, Steve, when I talk about personal initiative at work, what do you think are some of the steps someone could take to become proactive or take that personal initiative in their workplace?
I think the first is doing the research, right? We've got an idea, but what are the steps to implement it within that organization, and how does that happen? So, I think it's, like I said, doing your homework so that when you present administration with this new initiative, that there's a clear end goal. I think that that's the first step.
Right on. Yeah. And so I got a couple guesses in there in the chat, just to let you know that last quote, the one I said, it really says, we are the ones we've been waiting for. That was President Obama who
Right.
had that quote out there. I think it's a great quote, and it really puts the ownership on us, right? If we want change, if we want to see change in our workplace or change in our home life, it's on us. We can't wait for other people to do it. So, yeah, when we talk about it, I think initiative at work, we need to be proactive. And some of the ways you can be proactive are doing things that need to be done before being told, like are waiting for somebody else to do that. Find opportunities for improvement, and then asking others for feedback. That's a tough one, because when we ask for feedback, we got to make sure that our pride and ego is in check before we get it. What do you think?
Absolutely. Pride and ego is huge. But just to go back a little bit, you had made the comment that when we leave an organization, that we're just stepping out and it's done. And I really think that we can, as staff, we can be the ones that plant that seed and that role model, just as you were just saying, right? That we're role modeling what the change is that we want to see. I had a coworker that was really well versed, a lot of experience, but I watched how he interacted with kids, and his style wasn't the norm, but I saw it to be so effective that ultimately he became my mentor, because I saw the results that he was getting, and I wanted to emulate him, because I saw the success that he was having. I saw the interaction with clients, and that's really what helped motivate me to make change within our organization.
And that personal encounter with that guy, was he a supervisor? Was he someone of authority, of rank, or was he just a fellow coworker?
He was a fellow coworker.
Yeah, and I think that's strong. And I think a lot of times we can find that strength and that direction out of our coworkers, right? We can also find what we don't like. I know often in our classes we ask that question to come up with the perfect employee. One half of
Right.
the classroom gets the perfect employee to pick 5 traits, and the other one gets to pick 5 traits of what they would not want in an employee. And then the bonus question to that is, what are you bringing to the table? How many of
Right.
those positive traits and how many of those negative traits? So it's really important, I think, to have the self-evaluation. So another thing you can bring as far as initiative to your organization is voicing your ideas. Steve, was there ever a time in the group home that you voiced an idea and maybe have a story or an experience of how that went?
Well, um, so I was a case manager originally at one point within our treatment center, and we were seeing a need for a continuum of care model because clients were doing well in the treatment setting, but then they were going home and they weren't having support. So I had talked to some of the social workers that I worked with, and what are the services that we can provide that would help ensure success for our clients down the road? That continuum of care model. And I did my research and I had my partnerships, and I remember I went to administration and I said, "Hey, I got this idea. Let's start this new program." And they said, "We're really not interested." At that point, I could have quit. I could have stopped and said, "No, it's not an option," but I believed in what this program could offer. So I continued to work, and the more I learned, I would stop and I would talk to my supervisors, right? I would talk to administration and be like, "This is what I learned." And ultimately, it was 2 years later, but they said, "Steve, if this is the direction you want to go, this is a program that aligns with our ideals." Um, but ultimately, it took me going and meeting with county boards. It took me developing a billing structure. It took a lot of work that was based off of what my heart was telling me, but it ultimately it was on me to develop it. When I brought that information to them 2 years later, they said, "Yeah, let's go for it." Right. And then I had the support. But it took a lot of groundwork on my end, not knowing whether or not it would ever become a reality.
Yeah, and so many great points in what you just said, Steve. It really just kind of zeroed in on everything I have on my list about bringing personal initiative to it. But yeah, so voicing your ideas. How many times have we gone around and been around the water cooler or wherever, and we're complaining about uh, our our current culture, right? What's
Right.
going on and what's going on in the facility? But how many people are willing to make the change? And like you said, you came to your supervisors with a plan and they rejected it.
Right.
And then once again, how many times, if we've been rejected once, we just quit? That's it. Oh, things will never change. They're going to remain the same forever, right? But your attitude was you believed in it. And that's something about personal initiative. It's about believing in what you're doing is right, taking it to people who can make those decisions and changes, and not and if you're told no the first time, make them tell you why it's not a good idea. That's one of the philosophies I had on the SWAT team. My job was to make my lieutenant say no, why we can't do something. But I had to make sure I had the facts, like you were talking about. And one of the things I think you were talking about and was with me too is policy and procedures, right? I think
Right.
that's one of the big complaints in organizations, policies and procedures. But what happens? We complain about them, and a lot of times we just live with them, right? And I think if we want to see those changes, we have to do our work. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely, I agree. And so as you were talking, I'm listening, but I was also reading comments, and Neil asked, "How did I sustain my willingness um, with the lost opportunity?" Well, with that, Neil, I was bringing a new idea, and it was a program that had not previously existed within our organization. Um, I the organization that I was affiliated with, I absolutely love, and I know that we were doing amazing work. This was just in addition to it. So my goal was that I become as well versed in it so that I could essentially sell it. And because I knew that it aligned with our goal and with our philosophy. Um, so it was belief and it was education, because even had we never opened a group home, what I learned about that continuing care model and community-based treatment helped me become a more proficient assistant director, case manager within the organization. So it's self-growth as well. So I hope that answers your question, Neil.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and it's part of personal incentive is self growth, right? That's one of the definitions, because it allows us to set our goals, both short term and long term. And I think we should have that when we're out in the workplace. What are my short term goals to get through the day and have a positive impact on the people I come in touch with? And what are my long term goals? At one point, want to be like Steve and be a program director, running the place. So if we don't have that initiative, we're not going to make our goals. And there's a couple other things I think that go into um, personal initiative in itself, and I think some of that we talked about earlier, Steve, was an earlier conversation we had off camera. But it's focusing on self-care, right?
Yep,
And,
absolutely.
and yeah, give me your thoughts on what you think. How self-care can help with personal incentive.
Well, so we talk about self-care. Last week when we were talking about trauma-informed care, self-care was huge. Um, I think self-care and personal growth, the two are all encompassing in our lives, both personally and professionally. Um, if we're not healthy and happy, we're not going to bring that energy into the workplace. And I don't think that we're that as efficient of a promoter for change. But when we're living clean and healthy, um, it it benefits us throughout our lives. We always talk that Howie and I, we work out every morning together when we're traveling. Um, but we also check in, right? I mean, outside of that, after class, Howie's a sounding board for me, and I am for him. And it's having that partnership, that team mentality where you've got someone that's a sounding board. And I mean, I've come to you with ideas before, and in a very kind, gentle way, you're like, nah, I don't know. And you help me look at different points of view. And that helps give me clear direction on how I can move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right on. I agree. And why I'm taking a few minutes here to talk about some of the topics on self care. If you don't mind looking over at Tracy, he posed a wonderful question, and Christine came back with an answer. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that after I'm done talking a little bit
Yeah.
about self care. So when we look at self care, we're talking about three distinct, different subjects in self care. We have the physical, the mental, and the emotional. And I know we're probably good at one, maybe two, but probably not at all three, right? So I'd like you to think, which one do you lack at the most? Is it your physical, your mental, or your emotional self-care? And I know for me, it's probably it's probably emotional for me. I probably don't focus on that one as much as I should.
Right.
And when you don't focus on things like you should, you probably get opportunities and you ignore them. When you can show more emotion towards your kids, your family, people you come in contact at work. But those are the big three. And I think it's for folks who don't practice a lot of self-care, the experts suggest that you try with something small. Don't try to take a big chunk all at once and go, okay, I'm going to run 5 miles every day for the next week and take care of my physical. Then I'm going to take up an hour of yoga or something, to relax my mind. So take small bites. Try the 3 times a week approach with something new. Uh, but you're going to see a huge relief in your stress and possibly anxiety once you start taking time to take care of yourself. So, Steve, go back to you as far as looking at Christine's question.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The lack of reception from management, and then it becomes a truly sales and education, and how will this initiative that you're presenting, how can it positively affect our clients, our organization, and our culture as a whole? And then I think you hit on the big one, a lack of willingness on coworkers to try something different, because anytime we bring in that change, something new, that's scary for a lot of people. And I believe that it falls on us to demonstrate. Um, and so that staff that I had talked about, that direct care staff, Monty, I watched how he interacted with clients. I This guy was in crisis situations, but they very well. I can honestly say I never saw him go hands on when I
Mm.
worked with him. Um, and so just through observation, he was my motivation for change. Um, but also, I had coworkers who had double the time in the organization in the field that I had. And when I'm talking about de-escalation, I actually almost got set up where they're like, hey, you're the de-escalation guy, you take care of it. And what that took
Yeah.
was me going in and saying, all right, how can we work together? And I actually came in early for my shift, and I would review my notes in that person's area, and we would address the behavioral issues directly. But it took me not just um, working it, but it also took me working with coworkers and having those conversations, and showing how it can be beneficial and create a healthier environment for all of us.
So, Steve, I would think that with this topic and reverting back to some of the uh, instances you were talking about, if you really wanted change, it was kind of forcing you to step outside your comfort zone, wasn't it?
100%. Yes, absolutely.
And so, with that, stepping outside of your comfort zone, it's tough. It's it's a little bit intimidating for sure. But after you did that, how did your own self confidence grow?
Exponentially. Um, because I had done the research. So using the group home as the example, I never felt comfortable going to these big community informational meetings. And I was getting pushback from the community as well, right? That um, I was creating an environment. It's called NIMBA, not in my backyard. Nobody wants
Mm.
a treatment center or that in their neighborhood. But it was through education that I became the expert in the area on group homes and what they offered. So um, I knew the hours and days and weeks and months that I had put into educating myself. Um, and I also I went and I talked to other providers who were already running group home style facilities, and I went and I donated my time to sit and look at what the structure of those facilities looked like, and to educate myself where I could make change. So that's where my confidence came up, is I had done the legwork, and I could I could speak to the questions that were coming up. Yeah. So it was education, and it was great.
I think those are really great points because I think, a lot of times we sit around and say, oh, we'd like for this place to change. It's, doing things that it was doing back in the early 2000s or 90s, and we've
Right.
made no progression. Why don't the administration do that? But I think, one of the things you really cleared up today is that if you want to make a change in your organization, it takes work, right?
Yes. Yep.
And you need buy-in, and you need to get that buy-in from um, people that you can trust and have the same type mentality and believe in the same type of system of change. You're not going to win everybody over at once. It's like what they say, can't eat an elephant all in one bite, right? It's a piece at a time. And that's one of the reasons I think culture change in an organization takes time. It can often take, from a couple of months to a couple of years, and like it did in your case. That's based on the gap between your current culture and where you want it to be. But you can slowly introduce that change, and get buy-in from the people that you work with, and see the culture to change. I know we've seen it growing in the police departments that we've worked with,
Yep.
and with de-escalation. And there's so many advantages to trying de-escalation with folks who are having a crisis, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, on both parts, right? So the self-care even goes into that part when you're dealing with people in crisis. That if we try this approach of talking to people, giving them choices, and that's a tough buy-in. And I kind of think back to when you were talking about some of the older people that were there, been there longer, and actually tried to set you up. They're like, okay, Mr. De-escalator, come on in here and take care of this situation. We've set you up to fail, right? Another good point you made too is having your research.
But let me jump in quick there,
Yeah.
because I maybe in that staff's eyes they were setting me up to fail, but really I looked at it as an opportunity to promote what I had been preaching. Right?
Oh yeah.
It gives you the chance to show why this change is a positive.
No, 100%. You're not going to get that opportunity, maybe unless the situation arises where you get to implement your idea for that culture change. And I think that shows once again your initiative to make change, and you see it as a positive. Where I think some of the folks that have a harder time with change see it as an opportunity for you to fail. So anytime you're given that opportunity like that, and you can spin it, it just creates more buy-in from the middle of the road folks to the folks that agree with you, right? And eventually
Right.
you'll see that change encounter. What happens in my experience is either that change is good and it's accepted, and it starts to weed out the non-believers, and
Right.
sometimes it's just time for them to go or choose another career path, especially when you're dealing with folks in crisis, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
So we got about a minute and a half here, Steve. I'd just like you to sum up, what you think as far as personal initiative, why it's beneficial, and how it can help actually change a culture in the industry.
Right on. So we talked about personal growth, and I think Brendan is a great example of that. Brendan's the founder of CCG. He continually pushes us to grow, to educate. And I believe that that's true not just in this field, but in life. If we are not growing, if we get comfortable and we just stay at the status quo, then we're stagnating, right? And we've got to be looking, because client populations change, social trends change, and when we're offering treatment, we have to grow and evolve with those. So first and foremost, continuing to learn. So we may not even get the change we may not get that initiative that we're pushing, but we are getting personal growth and education from that journey. So continue to learn. Passion. Um, and respecting others, because it may take a while for people to take on this new information, and it's being patient, it's being professional, it's being respectful. It's This is an initiative that we want to bring in, so it is on us to help sell it. So do the work, be passionate, be patient, and do your due diligence.
Right on. So, Steve, I thank you for those closing comments there, and just reiterate the fact: if you want change, it takes work. I really appreciate you joining us today, Steve. I know we're not able to make it live, but having you on the phone on the call itself was super helpful to me, and I'm sure to everyone else. I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and wish you luck in your adventure and implementing your personal initiative into your programs at work. And like Steve said, keep educating yourself every day. You got to learn at least one thing a day, and hopefully more than that. So thank you. You guys have a great rest of your week. Stay safe, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, everybody. And if by